Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. It is actually the second episode on the week, and that is obviously because the Denver Broncos had a Thursday night game against the New Orleans Saints, and we'll dive into that game. Obviously, as you could tell, it is a two-man show tonight. It is myself and a co-host over there at Broncos App. He's also a contributor, writer over there at Predominantly Orange. He's been on the show before, of course, and he is he's been well known now in defending his quarterback. So what better person to have on the pod than my good friend Jordan Lopez. He ups on the show, and I tell you, Jordan, I don't know what was more what tastes good, like a nice little plate of gumbo from from New Orleans, or maybe some crawfish, or Sean Payton going back home, to the Caesar Superdome, and Drew Brees' Hall of Fame Hall of Fame Saints induction ceremony, and just waxing them 33-10. That ended up being the final score, Jordan, 33-10. So I don't know what was sweeter.
Man, I could have sworn though it wasn't 33-10. I don't know. People on social media are telling me otherwise. Was it?
What are they telling you?
I don't know. Like, I was being told Knicks wasn't playing well, like offense struggling, not punching it in. We won 33-10.
Yeah, I mean that's what for because I'm a box score watcher, right? That's when I see 33-10, that's
wow.
Yeah,
it was awesome. I mean, I was hoping we had a game like that sooner rather than later. It was just perfect timing with the Saints, Sean Payton's homecoming, the emotional return. I mean, he downplayed it all week, but it was perfect how it all played out. And I think it being physically imposing in terms of the run game, finally turning it on, and the offensive line just dominating their defensive line. Our running backs finally, finding the right holes and just having a great game, over 200 yards rushing if the final numbers do equate to that. I mean, it was just, I think if there's a way Sean Payton wanted to win the game, I think it was just like that.
It was basically as scripted for Sean. I mean, like like he gets a chance to play back in New Orleans, and at least I think there's this misconception that had been out there that he himself hates like New Orleans, or hated New Orleans, and you get a chance to see the interactions and even the comments that get made by him, and then the players, and then even when they actually like welcome him in, for Drew Brees' Hall of Fame, induction ceremony. I just think they're like, people made that like this big deal that like he's not gonna be well received, and it's like it was like it to me, and obviously I'm saying this like as an outsider, right? Like it felt to me like it was the complete opposite. Like he was rather welcomed with open arms, even from start to finish. I should say like from start to finish, with some of the players. I mean, and we'll get into some tinfoil hat situation, of course, with some of that. But, you had Alvin Kamara at the end of the game, Cam Jordan at the very end of the game, Jari Evans, again, the chance to, hug Sean Payton. So, I mean, I don't know, Jordan, like it just felt like it was a bit more overblown than maybe it needed to be.
Yeah, and I'm glad it wasn't bad. Like I had a feeling that maybe he was going to be received the wrong way, especially with all he's done, for that franchise and stuff like that. And I just really hoped for Sean Payton, because, again, we just think of them as the football guys in the building, but they're humans as well. I mean, he has a family. I mean, there's a lot of people there, relatives, family members, all that. Like I just really hope that they were welcome there, and not really, not. I don't want to say thrown on the bus, but received with a lot of booze and hateful stuff. Because the world can't be like that. But I'm glad it turned out the way it did. I think. I mean, I think we saw Champagne's wife down there, and some of the family he brought over there. It looked like
Connor with Megan, and I think Connor was there too.
yeah, it looked like they were received pretty well. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and on the game side, as you said, we'll start first with probably the most dominant part of this entire game, and that was that running game. And I think we got a chance to see the wrinkle we've been wanting, basically. And I think that again we'll dive into the next discourse, if you will, here in just a little bit. But I think that utilizing his legs is another aspect for him to get comfortable in games. And I think that early on, using that in the first half, first quarter specifically, is just one of those modes where they can really get him going and get him a little bit more comfortable in games. And we saw that, Jordan. Like we got a chance to see some of that, the read options, some of the QB powers, if you will. The QB power actually I think happened like a little bit later in the game, but like stuff that clearly showed that Nix was not afraid to run when there was like an open lane, or and I think that there's this misconception going around that like he does it too much, and maybe he does, but like it's one of those things. Like if you see an open lane like that, what do you want him to do? He's not going to pass up anything like that. I mean, if the lane is as big as a bus and you're able to scramble for 14 to 20 yards, I'm not passing an opportunity like that up, specifically with how underrated he is athletically. So he added a lot to that running game. And Jordan, it looked like, for as much hate that I will say maybe myself and maybe some of the others were kind of giving over here at 5280 with Javonte after his last game, kind of reverting back to his old self. This was like the best game we've ever seen from Javonte Williams. And he was phenomenal. I mean, like, and so you factor that in, and you factor, the Knicks element with sprinkled in, some Julian McLaughlin, who had some really nice, runs here and there. It felt like the Broncos got a chance to find their dual threat identity early on.
Yeah, it finally looked, and I'm glad it's been evolving throughout the season, but it looks like the offense found their identity. They found they know what they're good at, and I think it was a growing confidence within the whole offense. Not just one or two players. I think it was within the whole offense. The whole offense. Offensive line played great, and Javonte has stacked up a couple good games. I know despite the fumble he had against the Chargers, he has been stacking up 3 good games that he's played. And I think this Saints game that he just played, he played really good. I think it was a game that, at least in my opinion, knowing that Saints defense was a poor tackling team, they gave a lot of yards after contact and even after the catch too. I mean, Javonte has some good stuff over there too, but just in general, if there was a game for Javonte to really break out and have a game, and I talked about it in my preview episode, it was going to be this game for Javonte. And I'm glad he took advantage of the opportunity, because if it was last year's team or years prior, we had players that you think they would break out in a certain game and they just didn't. It's a bit different now with these players. I think they've bought into what they are and what they can do under Champagne and the offense and just the whole organization as a whole. And I think it really trickles down from the top down. I think it really does, that belief and that confidence. And Javonte, again, he played a great game, and I'm hoping that's a big step up for him in that running back room and that offensive line too.
A really good way that I think is to continue the conversation a little bit is because there's so much to peel back with this running game. Because because it all ties into one another, and I think that when you look at it from the running game side of things, it felt like Luke Wattenberg was starting to get better. Like he was starting to kind of get better and really, work really well as far as being, center. But he went down. He went down with injury. Forsyth had a pretty rough first start. But then he basically, has his start in a very tough environment, and you got to call a spade a spade. I mean, the Caesar Superdome is a very tough place to play. It's always been a very tough place to play. And he comes in and they establish the running game. And we're talking about a center, a 7th round draft pick center who's showing athleticism, who's getting to the next level, who's clearly showing and proving to be an impact down the field, specifically, obviously, on that quarterback run, where I can't even tell you the last time a center was, one of the last members, of the offense as they're finishing a play well down the field.
Yeah.
So I can't even tell you the last time something like that happened. So you add that particular element, and then obviously the tinfoil hat, the Sayre Bettinger, tinfoil hat situation of Alex Pavlovchevsky. What's going to happen with him? He's starting to kind of, trend and, basically come back a little bit. But a new wrinkle comes into this, and that is the health now of Mike McGlinchey, right, Jordan? Yep. So McGlinchey gets activated, and, here's a guy that has been just under so much scrutiny. He's been under so much scrutiny by fans and everything else. But his impact was just felt on that offensive line, specifically in that running game. So, I think that's the other element, too, that we need to talk about, because, for as much praise, and it's rightfully deserved for guys like Javonte and Jaleel, and, we'll probably have a conversation here a little bit about Estime and those fumble issues, because he might not see the field here in, a little bit, because of those early fumbles in his career. But, but it was really good to see those two guys, but specifically the offensive line and the run blocking and them creating lanes, with Powers and Forsyth and Miners. And then obviously you add the McGlinchey reemergence, if you will.
Yep.
They were great, Jordan.
Yeah. And I think Cody Rourke actually touched up on it a little earlier today too, on how we really haven't seen a lot of offensive linemen pulling this year in the run game. And we saw a little bit more in the Saints game. It was effective. I mean, the reason why I love the run game is because I get to see offensive line pulling, and I think it's really effective when it's executed correctly. And to see that, especially in the quarterback power they had with Bo Nix when he ran for 30 yards, that was just phenomenal. But to touch up on Alex Forsyth a bit, I think the run game, and our guy Patrick Coyote has talked about it. In the preseason, our run game was effective when he was playing. And there was a noticeable difference when he was not. And then go into the regular season. Luke Wallenberg, obviously the starter. Run game hasn't really
kind of hitting
itself. Yeah. And listen, Forsyth went in once Luke Wallenberg got hurt. And then you kind of saw the run game just kind of smooth out a bit. And I think this game against the Saints really was a tell, at least for me. I've always been a Forsyth guy.
Yeah.
And I thought sooner rather than later he would eventually get that starting spot. It just in my opinion, I don't know about yours, Cam, but I don't see Wallenberg getting that spot back if Forsyth is going to continue to be that guy. Again, I know Mike McGlinchey came back and he had a big presence in the run game, but Forsyth has been pretty good his reps and his snaps at that position in those run game. I mean, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that the element you obviously got to address there is the elephant in the room, and that is obviously the previous working relationship with Bo.
Yep.
And so if the Pistons are firing a little bit more, and and the chemistry is building specifically with the offensive line, and it's the best it's been looking, I'm not entirely sure I want to be messing that that up. And because it's one of the reasons why when Palczewski was playing so well, we were having the conversation about what do you do? Do you move Palczewski to left tackle, and and or do you shelve McGlinchey for the rest of the year and just have, Paul Chesky be your right tackle for the rest of the way? Then you still ride with Bowles a little bit. Then you kind of figure out what it is that you want to do there. But like, yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think but specifically with a young quarterback, that's where I think that using him as as a tool is important with this, because, I think we can all agree that, like, we definitely want to have, our preferences and, and everything, and so I think that specifically if Sean Payton and Sreef are having a conversation with, Bo, it's kind of like in baseball, right? Like, there's a particular starting pitcher that is very comfortable pitching to a particular catcher, right? Like,
Yep.
so,
Yep.
I mean, like, so I think that, they've got to ask Bo, like, what is your ideal starting lineup? Like, for your offensive line, like, what would you want to work with? And if in fact it is this Alex Forsythe at center, I very much think that you will be reaping the benefit of that. And I think it is, to your point, I think it is very telling that after the first start, there were some growing pains, but then after that second game, you really got a chance to see some strides, of maybe the best it's looked. And I think that, the thing with Wattenberg is, like, there have been moments, and as we said, it's been kind of staggered, but like it's been a little bit more on it's not as consistent. And I think that that's the hope, is that, say Forsythe, he comes in, and obviously McGlinchey's going to help, going to be helping with this too. But it's like, if the running game is consistent from like this Saints game all the way up, well past the Chiefs, then at that point, I think you are going to have a real conversation about whether or not Forsythe, should be your starter the entire way.
I mean, the Broncos recorded 226 rushing yards, and we haven't had that in years.
Yeah.
So I know there's other factors that go into the running game as well. But what's up, Ty? But Alex Forsythe, I think he's a hidden gem that is going to start blossoming pretty soon. And I think what I mean by that is, once we get a few games under his belt as the starter, we're really going to see that running game continue, that consistent, performances that we have been wanting from that offensive line group and that running game. I really think we are. I mean, he's an agile guy at the center position. He can climb up to the second level relatively easy, if we're being quite honest. Even our guy Patrick Kyoto talked about, he can still get stronger as well. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to like with Alex Forsythe. Obviously, it's going to help when you have one of the best right guards in the game with Quinn Miners right to your right. And I know Ben Powers have been struggling a bit, but still, Ben Powers.
He's really been turning the corner now.
Yeah, he's still a very good player, in my opinion, as a left guard. And then it's obviously going to help when you have a veteran presence like a right tackle and Mike McGlinchey, always helping out in the run game and stuff. So I like the way this offense is moving and what direction they're heading into. And listen, that's some of the things they're going to have to deal with a young team, especially with a young center and a young quarterback. But listen, I'm all here for it.
That's right. Yeah, Ty, we'll make sure we work on that to get you on the on the show. We'll bring the fireworks. And we'll talk about this too, obviously, because Vegas had it like 4 or 5 wins. We're gonna probably touch on that. The fact that the Broncos are already at 4, so yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on that here at the very end. The next thing I want to touch on, I feel like, is very near and dear to your heart and my heart when it comes to, like, specifically, one position, but sadly that one position kind of leads into the biggest conversation of this world. Yep. So it in terms of Broncos country, and it's the playmakers. One thing I will let me lead it off with this, Jordan. I will say that, like, it may not get mentioned. I will say this. I think the Broncos very much need that maybe a tight end more than a wide receiver. But when I'm saying that, like specifically this year, obviously I'm preaching to the choir. The Broncos, need a wide receiver one, might even need also a wide receiver two. Maybe. Fact is, they need players and playmakers, at wide receiver. But that said, they need a tight end who can help spread the field. That said, though, I loved the element of featuring Lucas Kroll a little bit more. I don't know if that means that they're going to start utilizing a guy like Kroll a little bit more, or on that very rare occasion now where maybe Dulcich is activated, that you do see him incorporated. But like, that's the part I thought was one of the underrated takeaways, was you kind of got a chance to see Lucas Kroll utilized in some areas where, frankly, Bo Nix necessarily hasn't really attacked in terms of a certain part of the field, which was the middle part of the field, which we know, dating back to his Oregon tape, he really does well at the middle part of the field. So I think that, getting the chance to see Lucas Kroll be involved, I felt like was one of the more underrated aspects of that entire game.
Yeah, Lucas Kroll, and I think this is not debatable. Lucas Kroll does have a well-known potential that everybody knows about. I mean, Lucas
Best player on the team.
He could be a very, very reliable and good tight end in this league. I really do believe that. What we saw from him was at least encouraging, because going into the season, we all had hopes for Greg Dulcich, and obviously that has not planned out whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And you want that the next man up type mentality. And
always,
Lucas Kroll is making the most out of his opportunities, and is just. And I don't want to compare again. We're probably going to talk about this anyway, but comparing to like what Caleb Williams has with the Bears, I mean, Caleb Williams has the pleasure, and Jaden Daniels, at least Caleb Williams has the pleasure of throwing to a Cole Kmet. That's his tight end.
We're another first-round pick.
Exactly. So Bo Nix's tight end has been healthy and active for the past 2 to 3 games. Yeah. So he's relying on Lucas Kroll, who was on a practice squad, that's his starting tight end, basically. Adam Trautman, I know he's really the starting tight end, but he's not that much of a receiving factor in the passing game. So that's why maybe getting a tight end in the deadline that can really be a guy that can help out Nix in the passing game can be super beneficial. But I hope Lucas Kroll continues to develop, and obviously Sean Payton does think the world of Lucas Kroll, because we saw some flashes last year as well, and we're continuing to see them now. But Lucas Kroll, I think he's going to continue.
Oh, we look like we had Jordan dip or something. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Maybe in this world of gremlins, it got to the point where, they just really weren't liking what Jordan was saying. But I think, to his point, like, the tight end position was it definitely needs to be featured. What's up, buddy? I wasn't sure if, like, the gremlins, the StreamYard gremlins were basically just like, you know what? We don't like that take, or what did Ty say? He's got the Paxton Lynch internet.
Yeah, I mean, Cortland Sutton is running routes on my Wi-Fi router.
To be fair, you've been, you're in the hurricane, area too, so it's.
I mean, it is not. I would say it's not pretty weather outside anyway. Yeah. But sorry about that. But
no, continue.
I was just finishing real quick. I mean, I hope Lucas Kroll continues to develop and have a role within the passing game, because I think as he continues to emerge, it's going to help out other playmakers on the offense, like a Troy Franklin and like a Vede. So I like that pass that he had with the passing catch that he had with Nix over the middle of the field. It was pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, the throw was a little bit high, but I mean, like, those types of seam routes, like, those are big, staples of a Sean Payton type offense. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we would, see something like that with, Jimmy Graham. Where'd he go to school, by the way, Jordan? Jimmy Graham. That's right. He went to the U. And I think didn't he have like Jeremy Shockey for like another period too?
Yep.
Where did he go to university? Where did he go? That's right. That's right. But no, it's just like that's a huge staple of the Peyton offense, or those like seam, routes to the tight end, or I should say just in general, like those very like dynamic plays to the tight end where they're able to just go uphill, and they're able to, create that downfield action, if you will, because they're such a big body that they could be able to create that and get a lot of that, yards after catch, if you will. So I'm hoping you see more of that. I don't know if that's going to be cruel, but I'll tell you, like, I'm hopeful that they could be a little bit more aggressive for a tight end, but I think it's definitely notable that, they need to go after a guy like that, whether it be a David Njoku or, and that's obviously the dream, but like, maybe a guy like a Dawson Knox, or so I guess it's a Miami Hurricane party. Jordan Akins, from the
Hey,
from
listen,
the Houston Texans.
Sean Payne loves his UM tight ends apparently. So
He does. He does. But I going forward now, because we were touching a little bit on the tight end. Let me preface it this way. So like I do see a world, because I posed this in the chat. You were very quiet about this, but I posed this in the chat. But that I see a world where I do think Courtland Sutton can be here next year. But it kind of comes with a caveat. Given the fact that Bo does trust him, you know what I mean? Does trust him. I do see a window where he's here. Unfortunately, the caveat is I don't see him as a wide receiver 1. It's going to have to be as a wide receiver high end 2 or maybe even a 3. Just given the playmakers. But that said, though, not to talk, indirectly about Bo Nix's development, but I will say I liked the fact that he realized, that Adebo and Marshawn Lattimore were, covering Courtland Sutton in the game, and he never even looked his way, to target him, which is exactly what you should do with the number 1 wide receiver, like on the roster. Is like, if he's there and he's clearly going to be, blanketed and, bracketed, the entire game, at some point you got to cut your losses and not target a player and start creating some other ways to get some of those other players involved, which is what we saw, in that game against the Saints. But I think that, maybe things are starting to kind of percolate, Jordan, within this wide receiver room. And that would be with some of those young players. And, I kind of put, my futuristic, hat on the moment Tim Patrick went out, because I think a lot of people felt like, Troy Franklin was going to get the redshirt year. A lot of people felt like that.
Yep.
The moment when they decided to move on from Patrick, I initially thought, gosh, I just don't know if, Franklin and specifically some of those younger guys, and obviously I didn't say Vele's name, but I was including him in that. I felt like maybe they weren't necessarily going to be given that redshirt year. And specifically in Vele's 3 games that he's been here. But Franklin, now you're starting to kind of see them really separate themselves, maybe not necessarily as wide receiver 1s or wide receiver 2s, but like as dynamic, targeted wide receivers, specifically with the offense that they would love to run with Bo.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think Troy is really heading into the direction of being Bo's guy. And what I mean by that, and this is with all due respect, listen, the wide receiver room, or wide receiver in general, is my favorite position. So I always have a more of a key look on them every single game and just everywhere. So I was very, very questionable with his wide receiver room heading into the season, because I just thought there was a lot of wide receivers that just did the same thing. They didn't really complement each other really well.
Yeah.
And unfortunately enough, it started to play like that week 1 and then week 2. And that was my fear, that it wasn't just going to work out. But I'm very, very happy at least as of right now, Troy Franklin is getting a lot of snaps and a lot of in-game reps, valuable in-game reps, to the point where he is developing that trust within his college quarterback in Bo Nix.
Again, yeah.
And they are transitioning that now onto the field in a big game against the Saints in front of everybody watching. Again,
Right.
Troy Franklin, our leading receiver, most catches, most yards. I mean, I love to see that. I really do. And I'll talk about Sutton a little bit, but also Devon Vele, I think him having a role within this offense, another rookie, is good. I hope Marvin Mims can continue to, or not continue. I hope he starts to turn a corner. I know he had a drop in that Saints game, but
It feels like it's baby steps. It's getting there, but it's like, come on, like.
but I also do think
Yeah.
though it may be. I don't want to make excuses for the kid,
Yeah.
but it may be due to the lack of in-game reps at that wide receiver position. I mean, we've barely seen him all year playing wide receiver. I mean, he was strictly last year. He was strictly just a punt returner. We
Yeah.
rarely got to see him on the field, and then to start this season, we rarely got to see him. We had to plead and beg
Yeah.
to have Marvin Mims out on the field against the Buccaneers game. In that Buccaneers game, I should say, he started to get a little bit more reps, and then he started to climb a little bit. But I think once he starts getting more of these in-game reps, hopefully something can click within him. But right now, those are my three receivers that I want to see more of together. It's going to be Vele, it's going to be Mims, and it's going to be Franklin. I really have high hopes for those three. I don't think none of them can turn into that wide receiver one guy. I think that's going to come through free agency or a trade.
Yeah.
But I do like what those three do bring to the table because I think they complement each other. In terms of Courtland Sutton, and I want to hear your thoughts about this well, but man, to not record a single catch and not get an official target in the game, and you are the wide receiver one. I understand
Yeah.
Marshawn Lattimore was on him.
Yeah.
But again, if you're a wide receiver one for a team, the ball has to get in your hands. And I'm not blaming it all on him, but there's just certain receivers in the league that the ball they find the way to get the ball. They just have that factor in them. And right now with Sutton, and I haven't seen it much, but he doesn't have that.
I feel like it's twofold because, as I was saying it earlier, because there was Adebo and Lattimore that were all kind of blanketing him and covering him, in that Saints game. And when I say that, I'm saying it from the standpoint of, Nix was doing a great job realizing that and was trying to do his best avoiding it. You know what I mean? Like trying to avoid a disaster, which kind of plays a little bit into Nix's game in terms of, eliminating the damage. But I think if you're Sean, specifically and you're Davis Webb and you're, Joe Lombardi, I think you should be looking at these types of situations that regardless, if maybe Nix isn't necessarily looking his way, let's get some creative, ways where we can do a rhythm throw, like just a simple rhythm out throw or whatever that Nix can be able to hit and, get Courtland Sutton some of those touches. Those types of plays I think will be beneficial. I would obviously venture to guess that against the Panthers, that's not going to end up being the case. He will be having a catch at least, against the Panthers because it always works out that way.
Yeah.
Whether doesn't mean that they're Pro Bowlers, but players that didn't have a single target or a catch the week before, they at least get a couple catches or they have what you would call a bounce back game to a certain degree in air quotes, the following week. So I would venture to guess that that's going to happen against the Panthers. So I'm not concerned about it, but I will say this though. This is the layout that I will say, while the wide receiver room is not, world beaters or, the most dominant wide receiver room, in the entire NFL, it's at least nice knowing the fact that your wide receiver one, which did not record a single target or a single catch, you still managed to put up 26 points on the board and manufactured points without needing him necessarily to contribute. So that should actually tell you alone that the other people around him are contributing. That, if you are talking about some of the targets for Sutton and then more targets for Franklin and Vele, it just starts to kind of add up, and you are talking about a little bit more of a more competent offense at that point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Bo Nix was on pace to throw for 268 yards at the end
Say
of
that
the
again?
268 yards.
Okay.
So I would say he was doing pretty good with what he had out in the field. Even not even looking at Sutton's way, whether right or wrong, whether he was covered or not, doesn't matter. Why our wide receiver one did not have a single target catch, and he was still on pace to throw for 268 at the end of the first half. Well, second half, we only threw the ball 5 times because we were already up by a lot, so we just want to run the clock out. So, of course, we just pounded the ball and just score like that. But again, I think that's another positive that you can look into when it comes to that whole discourse of, our wide receivers and
Or even
how it
Nick,
affects
yeah.
Bo Nix and stuff.
Yeah.
But I will say, and I don't want to sound like a hater. I really don't, but man, I don't right now, and I've been saying it for a while, but I don't see a role within this offense right now for Cortland Sutton. I don't.
Yeah. And I just think that going forward, it'll be interesting if more stuff unfolds. If more stuff unfolds like that, I think that's when you should be more alarmed. Is like,
Yeah.
the target shares are down, the yards are down. That's when I think that I would be very worried. Like, in the sense of like, what is his role in the offense, or maybe not even that, but like, what's his future in this offense? But by the same token, you're starting to see some of those young players perform. So for that reason, like, you should actually be a little bit more happy in the
Yes.
regard, in the regard that you're seeing some of those younger players contribute. So it's like it's kind of like a double-edged sword, like a two-folded, way to look at it, unfortunately. But I will say there's one area, and this is probably the most important caveat that's going to be leading to the biggest discourse of this entire night. One specific area where the wide receivers desperately need to work on is scramble drill. And this is, like I said, this is going to be leading to the biggest discourse of the night, and that is obviously the quarterback. Because too often people are blaming Bo for, making a play when the wide receiver is not necessarily, finishing his route or coming back to the quarterback, on a scramble drill, which, Bo is scrambling, but they're not necessarily helping him out and coming back and benefiting their quarterback. And I think that will come with reps. That will come with time. That will come with, consistency with how that offense will be. That said, though, that has got to change, Jordan. Like that has got to change, because they have got to help out his quarterback, as much as they can. And, even for guys like Cortland Sutton, at times you still see some of that from a veteran wide receiver, and that is super concerning. And I realize, you're the biggest little Jordan Humphrey fan in the world. But to be fair, like, he's like the one guy in scramble drill that you can trust that is at least going to go back to the quarterback and help him out on some of those plays and get those yak yardage and, and really provide some of that. So I think that to kind of lead a little bit, to the Bo Nix discourse, is like that scramble drill specifically from those wide receivers, like, they've got to do a much better job of helping out their, their young quarterback.
Especially that Nix is buying time for these guys, because they first of all, these receivers have a hard time just getting open in general. So once Nix is buying time for them, they have to figure out a way to get open then too. I mean, we have some of the worst wide receivers in terms of creating separation when the other team's in press coverage as well. I mean, and the stats are out there. Like, Sutton's at 2 yards Josh Reynolds at 1.4.
Bailey leads the team, right?
Yeah, no, the one that leads the team in separation and press coverage is Troy Franklin right now. It's 4.5.
It was Bailey, I thought,
and Devon Vele right now is at 3.2. And again, it's two rookies at the top of the list that have been trying to help Knicks in getting separation. But even so, let's say whatever for whatever reason that play they just couldn't get any separation. They lost that 1v1 matchup in that play. Yet when Nick still buys time and scrambles out of the pocket, you got to make a play for your guy. You just have to. And you made a great point. I think the reason why little Jordan Humphrey still gets snaps for this offense is because he does the little things like that good, though. That he excels at that. And that's something our wide receiver room lacks right now. It's that scramble drill where no one got open. Knicks is running. He's buying more time for you guys. Who's going to make a play? Who's going to get open for that last quick second? I think we saw Vele in that Chargers game. He got open that quick second once Knicks went out the pocket. Knicks had that nice little no-look pass to him. But, yeah, that's something that is going to have to improve. But I think that's going to come with time, though, knowing where Knicks would like to have the ball during scramble drill, where he's looking at, what he wants them to do. So, again, I think it will come within time, but it's not encouraging that a veteran receiver like Sutton is. I don't want to say he's still struggling in scramble drill, but you would think he'd be that guy though in scramble drill by now, especially with the rookie quarterback.
Yeah. All right, Jordan. Let's talk about it. Well, to anybody that's in the chat, we'll talk about our positives. We'll talk about that defense, that beautiful defense. We'll talk about that. Let's get it over with. This QB discourse that's going on right now on social media, and Jordan, I thought for sure, and thankfully the Broncos got that victory, against the Saints. But even then, the discourse immediately after, winning, 3 games, having a 3-game winning streak, you wouldn't know it by the way that, the social media realm has been acting with Broncos Twitter, Broncos country, Bronco land. I don't know, whatever you want to call them. Thank you, Mike Liss.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. But like, I thought for sure we would be turning a corner and realizing that, you know what? We have a 3-game winning streak. We had an unfortunate bump in the road against a divisional opponent, a well-coached divisional opponent. He didn't play well, but like, let's still kind of take our lumps a little bit. It was 1 game. No, we ended up proving once again why Josh Allen would not have worked in Denver because of the fact that we as a fan base, we as a crowd are just not patient with quarterbacks, that we're willing to jump off ship, or the moment one weakness happens is the moment that 2, 3, 4, 5 more weaknesses get amplified, and you start critiquing and criticizing his game more and more and more, that the criticism turns to not criticism anymore, it turns to hate. Yep. And that's exactly where things have been leading. We've seen it in the Drew Lock era. We saw it in the Paxton Lynch era to a certain degree. We even saw it with Trevor Siemian. The hatred that unfortunately went his way that was unnecessary. Even Teddy Bridgewater at times. So it was just like, it's not going away.
Unfortunately, it is not. And I don't think it's going to end relatively soon. I think this is going to be a thing that we're going to have to live with for at least for now. And when I mean for now, for the rest of the season. I mean, it's gotten to a point.
Maybe his entire career, actually.
And it could certainly be that. It really can, because I think in today's day and age, people would do everything in their power to keep on telling people, hey, I'm right about this. And they just want to prove themselves that they're right. Even if you think that Knicks was bad, and they just don't want to credit his flashes. They just want to talk about the negative stuff. And to be honest, there's a lot more positives than negatives. Yet a lot of the national media doesn't hear it because I don't want to say the local media, but the infrastructure of each timeline of each team, right? I mean, a lot of media personnel follow a lot of fans, and whether they'll be trolls or whatever, that all gets flooded within the timeline. And most of that is negative, which is unfortunate. Bo Nix, I understand there's been a lot of people that came out during the draft. Oh, I don't think he's good and all that, just sticking their chest out, letting everyone know how they feel about him and how they evaluated him, which is fine. You can state your opinion.
Right.
I'm not mad at that. My biggest pet peeve in all of this is when people talk in a matter-of-fact tone. That's where it gets a little bit out of control, because that's when the ego starts getting in the way and the ignorance and all that. And I understand that negativity hogs publicity, but it's all right, and I think it's healthy to admit when it's good and when it's bad. Like I will always say, I coach high school basketball here. I would rather learn more than know less. Like I want to learn everything possible. I want to continue to learn. Like I don't want to be that guy that knows everything. I want to continue to learn. The more I learn, the more I'm gonna be knowledgeable about everything else. But there's a lot of people that just rather just be like, yeah, and just continue to be like that. Like, no, I know he's not good or whatever. Like it's unfortunate. It really is.
And I think I've said this to you before, but it's like, it is far more easy. It's far more easy to spew hate than it is,
Yes.
Like any sort of love or anything like that.
Correct.
And like, and I'm not trying to, make it seem like that's like a motivational quote, but it's just like, that's a motivational quote. Like that's just,
but it's true. It's true.
but it's true. It's like, it applies to sports. It applies to life. Like it is just, unfortunately, the way that things are, is like, it is far more easier to spew crap than it is, any sort of positivity. I think that the other side of it too, and you touched on it briefly, is like the ego side of things with the pre-draft process. Like how many type of people that are media members are sitting on their laurels, if you will, of, Bo Nix as a prospect, and being like, well, he didn't exactly do this, or this is still one of the, look, I mean, I don't think Bill Simmons is a football guru by any means, but like he obviously was mentioning how funny it was that Nix had a pass in between two defenders, and saying it's one of the funniest passes he's ever seen. It's like, dude, you need to get out more, because there's been far more passes that are way worse. I mean, Patrick Mahomes actually had a play like that a couple of years ago, whatever, against the Washington football team. It was way more egregious than that, but you won't hear people talk about that.
I mean, Jordan Love just had a pick six in the end, in his own end zone, that I promise you, Cam, if Bo Nix does that, I mean, I think social media I think it'd break.
Yeah. And I think that, so often it all comes back to some of that, where you gotta call it for what it is. Like guys like, the QB school, and some of these guys that are out there, they're sitting on their pre-draft process, and that is simply where things are and where they're at in their evaluation. They can't sit and be like, you know what, week to week, you're starting to kind of see somewhat of some progressions. There's definitely been some bad. There's been some footwork bad. There's been some, some decision making bad. But like, let's kind of just sit and watch. You know what I mean? Like, let's kind of sit and watch how things progress. No, we're going to absolutely, smash that hate button, right? Smash that hate button, every single Sunday that, Bo Nix plays and has a snap in the NFL. And we're going to make it hate speech. You call it for what it is. Like, you're going to make it. And so it is what it is. But you and I kind of talk through, what is actually going on with Bo Nix right now. I mean, because I think that you and I touched on it briefly, Jordan, and I think that, at the start, you are starting to see his athleticism. And I think that let's start there, because his athleticism from the very beginning was underrated, but I think a lot of people didn't necessarily think that it was this good or that it was this fast or that he was that type of athletic, coming out of college. And I think that, they all saw the dual threat ability, but
Yep.
they didn't necessarily. And I'm not trying to actually make this as a comparison because, it's not. But I think it's definitely appropriate given with how their career started, and that is you saw more mobility with Josh Allen in his first handful of games.
Correct.
And I think that, he lended a little bit more off of that, but he started developing more of his game. And I think where Bo has at least some of it, what in his game is, he's already kind of got the progressions and ability to read a field, a little bit there coming from Oregon. And I think you're seeing some aspects of that in games. That's, at least through seven games, but it's just the athleticism to me, Jordan, is probably the one area where it's like, oh wow, we're talking about a situation where his Brock Purdy's ceiling that maybe a lot of people were, talking about as maybe like the ceiling. We should probably go maybe a step above that because his ceiling looks to be much higher than everybody anticipated.
His athleticism is, I think, what makes it that step above. I think we all knew he was somewhat athletic and that he can move around really good and stuff like that. But to the point where we're running a quarterback power for him and he's running 30 yards and he could have scored.
Would have scored if he didn't. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, right now, Bo's best attribute right now for this offense and the Broncos is making plays out in the perimeter.
With his legs.
Yes, and with his legs out on the perimeter. I mean, he still has a lot to work on in the pocket with his feet and all that. He's inconsistent at best at doing that because whenever he does set his feet, I mean, he rips it. I know I don't know where it's come from, but on social media, there's a narrative of Bo Nix not having an arm and lacking arm strength. I don't know.
It's maybe not like the strongest in the world, but it's there.
I don't know how that came about. I mean, you can just look up the longest completed air distance in the season in the NFL. He's top 10. So he had a 54.5 pass he had earlier in the season. So I don't know where that narrative came from. But you could just tell, like, in that Saints game, when he set his feet and ripped Vele on that slant, that was an absolute rocket. I actually thought he threw the ball too hard, that Vele might have dropped it a little bit. Because, I mean, it was an absolute rocket. But right now, his best attribute out on the perimeter, making plays with his legs. Everyone sees it. I mean, he has scrambled for the most first downs so far, and he's attempted passes outside of the pocket at the league highest rate. So there's a reason why, and it's because he's really good at it. And I think Sean Payton is using his best attribute right now to have this offense be as successful as it can be. And as soon as the pocket stuff starts to develop and progress, which it is, and you can see already some of the steps that he's been taking throughout the season. Again, I understand he started the game a bit antsy and a bit anxious, as you can tell. I mean, he usually doesn't miss that throw to Lucas Kroll. But
even Troy Franklin, for whoever he was.
Exactly. Which, again, everyone can make fun of it, whatever they want. I've seen $50 million quarterbacks right now in the NFL have worse throws than that, but I digress. But anyway, as he's learning how to win in different ways, but the main way we're winning is with his legs, and I think that's a big, big part in his development. I think it's going to be very key going forward in his whole development progress.
Yeah, and I think that for Bo, and you look at, there's the other notion of this where he bails on pockets or that he's got no pocket awareness. And it's just like when he's scrambling and he's doing stuff the way that he's doing and he's, and he's running for yardage, that is in essence, a mode of pocket awareness. Like when we touched on it in using the legs, when you're seeing the C part, the first play of the game against the Saints, the first play of the game, and the sea basically part,
Yep.
and it looks wide open on Bourbon Street. I'm taking that. Like I am absolutely taking that and scrambling for 14 to 15 yards. And he, and he did exactly that. Is that bailing a pocket? No, that is actually using your brain that God gifted him and scrambling for 14 to 15 yards. And I think that the other aspect of it too is because of the fact that he's, because of that, he also doesn't go through his progressions or, at times. And it's like, the area where you see it is when they go up tempo or that you see the RPO game.
Yep.
And, like he's literally going through his progressions. I mean, there are numerous situations. I mean, you don't have to look no further than even preseason. There was a play that he made in preseason when I was at the Packers game, and I think, it was even highlighted by, Jenkins, but it was a play to Cortland Sutton near the red zone where it was like, he went through his progressions and he, saw Sutton on,
Yep.
One of the dagger routes, and he's able to hit Sutton,
Yep.
on a clear path, so it's just like, it's there. So like to anybody that just wants to, say things like it's not there, it's never there. It is. We've seen it before. He's clearly shown it. And even, on the play to Cortland again, like in the Indianapolis Colts game in preseason, like he's out there on the run and he's making a nice little touch throw on the run,
Yep.
So I mean, like it's there. And I think that everybody they just need to relax and they need to realize that, they're being too hard on him. Like they're being way too hard on him, and that they need to understand that, for the first time, Jordan, for the first time since I can recall, since Peyton Manning, that an offense led down, and obviously Sean Payton, he's not going to get enough sleep necessarily. He's not, with the fact that they only scored 2 touchdowns out of the 7 opportunities that they had necessarily in the red zone, or the 6 opportunities that they had in the red zone. Like he's gonna lose sleep off of that. But it was the first time that I can think of where they had 6 opportunities in the red zone. And nearly every single drive, a quarterback led them down into scoring position, and they punted 3 times. Look, Broncos country and Broncos Twitter and whatever. When was the last time we ever said that? Like, they only punted 3 times.
That's crazy. It is. It'd be one thing if we didn't see those flashes within the pocket and stuff like that and those throws, right? Because if we haven't seen them at this point, then we can have a serious discussion and debate about it. But we've seen it. And not only have we seen it, we've seen it multiple times in one game too. Like we've seen flashes from the pocket with those dagger routes that he continuously hits each and every game. It hasn't been one game, then he doesn't do it the next, and then he does it the other. It's been constant. One, like he's been doing it. So him having those flashes it should make fans comfortable enough to be like, all right, we might have something here. I know he's struggling in other areas, and I don't even really want to call it struggling. It's just more so it's just rookie stuff that he has to get over.
Yeah.
I understand that he's a very experienced college quarterback, but again, everybody talks about it. And it's funny. Drew Brees was in the commentary booth in the third quarter, and I just find it amusing how former executives and former players and how they talk about the developmental progress within rookie quarterbacks and just talking about the game in general, how differently they talk about it. And then you just go to social media and you see how it's viewed there. Like, and it's so vastly different in how the games are viewed. Like, and that's the one thing that really holds me down and keeps me grounded with all these conversations and discussions, because, and this is just me, I don't know how others feel, but I would rather much listen to former executives, former players, Hall of Famers in this point when I'm talking about Drew Brees, or future Hall of Famer. I'd rather take their knowledge and wealth of knowledge and listen to them than people on social media that have a very, very good tendency of just wanting to hate and all that. So it is a very refreshing point that I want to bring up because it's just vastly different how they talk about the game and how quarterbacks see it, how they see the field and all that. And I think Breeze has said it in the third quarter as well. The game is starting to slow down a bit for Knicks. Not all the way down, but you can see it's slowing down just a very, very tiny bit. And that's all you need. Well, he's making those progress. Once it slows down to the point where he's really comfortable, then it's going to start looking real good. Because, again, he was on pace for 300 total yards. Because, again, he was on pace for 82 rushing yards as well.
Which means there will be games where Vanilla Vic will have 100 yards rushing. Like, there will be those games. But it's your point. Like, you and I've had this conversation even off air and texting, and it's just like this was the weirdest year in evaluating quarterbacks. And we'll say this, and we'll jump into the defense here. But like, it was the weirdest year in evaluating quarterbacks. And it's I love Jaden Daniels. I liked Caleb Williams. So like I liked kind of like all these prospects, but it was like you go to Bo Nix specifically. You had those analysts, right? You had those analysts that are really smart at their job, but then you go to some of those analysts that were former players, former players in general, and would speak very highly about the fit of Sean Payton and Bo Nix. And they would just rave about it. Chase Daniel, from the very beginning, was like one of the few people. Joe Klatt played with Sean. One of the few people, to talk about, the fit with Sean Payton and Bo Nix and how good that fit is going to be. Phil Simms, the guy that we all love so much over here in Broncos country. Phil Simms, Chris Simms, the Simms family. I think because Phil's got a show on the Believe Network. Like, they talked about it. Like, they talked about how much of a great fit it was with, Bo Nix and Sean Payton. Kurt Warner talked about it. So it's just like, to your point, like, you start reading things and you start kind of realizing things that you're not crazy, but you start kind of realizing, that like these guys really know what they're talking about. And so you kind of look at things just a bit differently in the sense that, this might be the one year where I'm not necessarily, following too much about maybe what Adam Schefter's saying, but I'm actually following kind of like what is, these guys like a Kurt Warner saying, what is a Chase Daniel saying, what are some of these players, saying, because of the overall fit and just the way it's gone down. But let's get to the positive, or I should say like the biggest positives that has been this season, and that is the defense, Jordan.
Man, this defense, it's. I thought when we were playing good in the beginning of the season, I still had that doubt in my head, and maybe it's because I have PTSD from that Miami game. I mean, I literally still have the water bottle that I saved from that game here, just a memory of that game. But us playing that good in the beginning of the year, I'm just like, maybe this is just like a hit or miss type of defense. If they're on one that game, they're on one. And then if they're not playing that well, then it's just a complete downfall of that game. But man, this defense is legit. And it was perfect. I think the perfect nickname was the Anonymous Crush. And it was perfect by John Gruden. But there's just so much dogs on that defense. There's so many dogs on that defense that just have a lot to prove and want to prove something to the league. Like, they have that chip on their shoulder. Like, there's only one first rounder on that defense, and that's Surtain. And he didn't even play on Thursday night. So there was no first rounders on that defense Thursday night. And they just play fast. They play violent, and they're physical. And I mentioned this on the post game in Broncos Avenue. For how physical that defense is and how violent and fast they are and how they tackle, you would think there'd be a bit more injuries to that defensive side. But that talks, and I think you have to give a lot of credit to what Sean Payton, what he implemented in that strength and conditioning program. And I forgot the right word he used in his press conference, but within that health department, because he really had a plan with that recovery program and how they did stuff, and it's been translating now because that defense, it cannot be underestimated or understated how physical that defense is, and to have 0 to none basically injuries on that defensive line. Baron Browning just came back. I mean, it's pretty remarkable what this defense has done in terms of health wise, how they're playing, how fast, how violent, how physical. I mean, it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, and I want to. This is a conversation for another podcast, and you can certainly have it on, Broncos Avenue. And this is a question that was posed by, a friend of the program, and he said it on the show in one of our comment sections, and he basically said how much of Jim Leonard, has been a huge influence for a guy like Vance Joseph, specifically with his defense, because I think that, and then if you go even just a bit more, you're starting to see the aggressiveness seep through all the areas of this defense. The defensive line basically becoming the beast mode, as D-Rock mentioned it, in the first part of our show. It's like the beast mode, of this entire defense, and then you go to the secondary, and it's trickling there. Brandon Jones, you've been down there in Miami. I never knew him to be a very hard-hitting physical safety from the stuff that I had been seeing, but he's playing like his hair is on fire. PJ Locke has had some of that physicality to a certain degree, when Justin was here and obviously Kareem was here. So he was kind of already indoctrinated a little bit. But like Riley, it's almost like he's back with Iowa. It just playing with that, physicality, with how Jim Leonard coaches. And like Leonard is a very aggressive coach. Jamar Cain is a very aggressive coach. And so it just thought it all comes together with this aggressive mindset. And from top to bottom, from the front seven to the back end, like it's very cohesive right now. And there's very few moments, very few drives where you're like, man, what happened here on some of those drives? And those do happen. I mean, like, 'cause no one's perfect. It's not like a video game. We're going to be, stopping, some team for like minus 15 yards for total offense or whatever on an entire game. That's not going to happen. But like, it really has been so impressive, Jordan. Let's just start with this first, with the defensive line. And obviously, because D-Rock mentioned, like, Zach Allen is turning into a mini JJ Watt / Aaron Donald. I mean, like, he has been, maybe it's just because he's wearing 99. I don't know. But like, he has just been absolutely an animal. I mean, ESPN pass rush win rate has him still through 7 weeks as the number one leader in terms of pass rush win rate. And I think Malcolm Roach is probably still within the top 8, I think, in terms of there. So that is one area specifically, Jordan, where like everybody is eating. And I mean, Jordan Jackson got involved in this Saints game. So like everybody's getting a piece.
Man, Zach Allen has officially turned himself into a Tuesday player, meaning teams usually when they game prep for the week on Tuesday, they talk about the other team's best players and what they're going to do to neutralize them. And that's usually like your Aaron Donalds, your Aiden Hutt, like those guys. Zach Allen's turning into that Tuesday player. Like the other team's talking about him on Tuesday. How can we neutralize him? What can we do for him not to wreck the game? They're game wreckers. He's turning into that guy. It is remarkable what Zach Allen has done this season. It really is. And I understand with the defensive player of the year conversations and how that usually works and stuff, but he needs to be at least in the conversation. I know he's not going to win it, but he has to be in the conversation at least. That's how effective he's been for this defense. And those players around them, it's contagious. They feed off of it. I mean, Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, those guys are feasting. I mean, most of the attention is going on Zach Allen, and rightfully so, because if it's not, Zach Allen's just going to tear that offense apart, especially the interior. But Bonito, my guy, I mean, I played AAU ball with him when I was little here, so I know him. He's been, I mean, what, another game with another sack? That's 5 straight games.
First time since Vaughn.
I mean, listen, I've known Nick for some time. Haven't talked to him in a while, but his get off, I didn't know he was that quick, if I'm being quite honest. I mean, he jumps off the screen. He literally does. I thought it was an offside on one of the plays, but he perfectly timed it up. I'm super proud of Nick Bonito, and I hope he continues to be one of the main pass rushers. But guys like him, Cooper, we saw a little bit of Baron Browning coming off an injury. And listen, I know we're going to talk about him right now, but John Franklin Myers, listen, I would like to personally thank the New York Jets. I don't know how they let that guy get out of that building. I don't.
Yeah. The argument can be made that the Broncos already had Hassan Reddick in the building, and that would be Nick Bonito, and they just got, John Franklin Myers. When the Jets are searching for a John Franklin Myers, and they're searching, for a Hassan Reddick. I posed this on social media today. It's a really fun conversation right now, because I will say, and to use the argument, and you can use it too with the Celtics of being homegrown on this, but I think the best of the both worlds for the Broncos is grooming and developing your edge rusher 1 and edge rusher 2. They might have it right now. They actually might have edge rusher 1 and edge rusher 2. The problem I'm trying to decide is who is edge rusher 1 and who is edge rusher 2. And that's a good thing now for how well they're playing. So my question is it Jonathan Cooper as edge rusher 1, or is it Nick Bonito as edge rusher 1? I mean, it's such a hard conversation for me to ask.
I mean, statistically speaking, that conversation needs to be had in a good way, because we're not asking it in a way of, hey, we have no pass rushers, like who's our best? No, we're saying in a way where we have pass rushers that are getting pressures every single time they're on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Baron Browning just returned from injury, and I hope everyone knows, if Baron Browning can just stay healthy,
mm-hmm.
he's arguably one of the most talented players on this roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, if he can just be a little bit consistent with his health and play alongside Bonito, alongside Cooper, man.
Which by the way, to the people that were kind of hating on Baron Browning, let's pipe down a little bit. That was his first game back. And so
he still had an impact. He still had an impact.
Yeah. There was the disappointing onside penalty and everything. That's all timing. That's just getting your timing back and getting your timing and trying to jump the snap count and, just getting back into play shape, if you will. So let's kind of, pipe down a little bit on, some of the Baron Browning, hate a little bit. That said, though, it is very much led by guys like Jonathan Cooper and Bonito, leading the charge a little bit. And I think that where it gets so fascinating with a guy like Bonito is, he's got so much versatility to his game, where you did see where you do get a chance to see the Hassan Reddick comparisons that were being made, in the pre-draft process, to where you could drop him into coverage. Vance did that in the, at one point this year. He dropped him into coverage and made him a QB spy. People may not know this, but he did that at Oklahoma. Was darn good at it. And then you go out and you have one of the highest pass rush win rates at Oklahoma since maybe Myles Garrett. I actually have to find that stat, but there was a statistic that came out, and he was the highest, what is it, pass rush run rate, basically like of the top 10 years or something. Vaughn was there, Myles Garrett was there, and Nick Bonito was there. Like, he gets to the quarterback. And I think that the one area where he really needed to develop a little bit more was the run defense. And I think because of the fact that you're seeing guys like John Franklin Myers and Allen and all these guys eat, is the reason why you're seeing Bonito and Cooper, being so strong in terms of stealing the edge. But I also think too, like, and he was inactive, but like Dondrea Tillman adds that other element to this too, where it's just like, he didn't exactly, like I said, he wasn't active, but like that's probably one area specifically of his game where being a run defender is probably the best part of it. And now you add the mixture where probably he can get to the quarterback. So I love it, because now you get a chance to possibly develop your edge rushers 1 and 2, possibly with guys like Nick Bonito and Cooper, and sufficiently pay them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and Cam, to add to that point, like, we still have Jonah Ellis and DeAndre Tillman that we really don't talk about. Mm-hmm. Jonah Ellis got some snaps against the Saints too, but
got a half sack, I think.
I mean, Jonah Ellis has whenever he does, he has 85 pass rush snaps. He has 11 pressures, and that equates to 10.8%.
He's basically another Nick Bonito.
And when we want to talk about DeAndre Tillman, he makes the most out of his pass rushing snaps. He's had 38 pass rushing snaps. He's had 6 quarterback pressures. In terms of quarterback pressure percentage, that's the highest on the team. So he makes the most of his snaps. So listen, this group is deep. They're violent. They're fast. They just push that pocket. They push in. They're fun to watch on Sundays, Thursdays, whatever you want to say. They're just really fun to watch.
And to end it all, we would be remiss if we didn't get a chance to talk about the demon of the day. And that would be, the moment when Quan Alexander was elevated was the moment that Cody Barton basically turned into Luke Kuechly.
Yep. I mean, who saw that coming?
No one.
Yeah, literally nobody.
Yeah, literally. Maybe Barton himself, but like, that was crazy. So I think that, like, that's just, do I think that that's going to be sustainable? I don't know. But the linebacker play has been at times the weakest point of the defense. So you hope that stuff like that continues. But if you're getting that kind of production with your defense, like now from your linebacker room, you're talking about a team that is tops in the league defensively, up and down in the trenches to the back end to even the middle part with your linebackers. So I don't know. It was a dominant, to tie bow on all of it, Jordan. It was a dominant performance by the Broncos. And, hopefully, we can maybe, do some finagling and do some trades and, get a chance to maybe, bring some players in. I will say this, Jordan, as we're, ending this a little bit, I would much rather them maybe make a move here in these 10 days and not necessarily wait until after Carolina. Because I will say the unfortunate thing is the trade deadline is like after the Ravens game, and I don't want to wait that long.
I don't want to wait that long either, brother.
No.
So I heard there's some guy, a running back in particular.
Yeah.
That's available to trade. I think Champagne's very familiar with him.
Oh, is it Reggie Bush? Is he coming out of retirement?
Yeah, it might be.
No. Well, boy, you add Alvin Kamara to this mix. Look, obviously we were talking about Javonte Williams here just, a bit ago, but Alvin, you add Kamara to this mix, he instantly becomes your wide receiver 1.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Right back 1. Like, he instantly becomes almost like your number 1 target on this offense.
And he won't necessarily take all the snaps from the running backs. If anything, it's going to help that running back room, because he would literally be our joker. It would help everyone on that offense. So it's going to be interesting what happens there. I already know Champagne will call in and say and gauge the interest and see what's going on over there.
You already know he's had a conversation with Georgie.
Yeah. I mean, I would not be surprised if those talks start heating up a bit. But I think we all know tight end, wide receiver, and then obviously Kamara as a specific name are all the topics of discussion.
He's actually isn't he a free agent next year, Kamara?
I believe so.
So we tie a bow on all of that to basically say if they don't want to trade for him, read the breadcrumbs a little bit. There's a pretty decent chance that high chance that Alvin Kamara might actually end up being a Bronco, either at the trade deadline or maybe next off season. But Jordan, this was a blast, man. Thank you for going a little bit long, but like I think I even texted you because you said you gave like a rough estimate of time, and I said, well, it may be 15 to 20 minutes, after, depending on our vent session, if you will. So
always good. So it's always good to talk Broncos football. I would never get tired of talking about Broncos football. No, even through the rough patches and all that, like it's always something that I look forward to. And actually last night reminded me, like right before the game was going to start, they were playing kind of like the pregame hype stuff and all that. And I got that feeling again, like hey, this is a big game. No matter the game getting completely shitted on social media and everybody making fun of it, like those feelings, I'll never pass up on those feelings. Like I'll always love the Broncos no matter what. Seeing those colors and those uniforms in person and just the helmet in person whenever I do go see them play, it's always warms my heart. So again, I'll never be down, or I'll never miss out on an opportunity to talk about Denver Broncos and football. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's always a great thing when you can stop and smell the roses. I had to. We love you, Pat. But yeah, so thank you guys again to everybody that's been in the chat. Make sure you follow the work that Jordan does. Following them over there on Broncos app. Follow him on social media at Jordan T. Lopez. And obviously the work that he does and writing over there, predominantly orange. Follow myself at Cameron Parker PO. And follow the social media handle of Manely Broncos at Manely Broncos. It's been an absolute blast. We are going to do another show back to our originally scheduled broadcast of Wednesday, where we'll probably talk a little bit more about the game, about the Saints game, stuff that we didn't get a chance to touch on. But we'll obviously preview the game against the Carolina Panthers, because there's a pretty decent chance the Broncos might actually go to 5-3 on the year. Actually continuing to bump up their win total from the idiots that basically said that they're only a 3 to 4 win football team.
Someone might have the over too.
For Jordan, myself, this has been another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. Have a great weekend.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame miles. So high, I might never